Good morning.
Oh,
Hello.
Jeb, good to hear your voice.
Hello, Mr. Wood.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Eric.
Hi.
Hey, Rob, thanks for handling the question that was filed on the
Yeah, no
sync
problem.
GitHub repo.
That was an easy one.
Yeah. So I know Nick is out today. A few more minutes for people to show up. So just a question, how many people here are going to be making it to the OCP Summit in Barcelona in a few weeks? Is anybody from here going to make it?
I will
I
be there.
will.
Hey, Eric, I won't be, but one of our team will certainly be there.
Okay, cool.
Definitely knows at
Yeah.
all the events. I won't be making that one, but I'll be at the Montreal one.
Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, the OCP community is growing and much, global is growing 20 or 30% every year, and Europe is as well. I'm going to guess we're going to be probably 1,000 people this year. Well,
Wow.
if trends continue, it'll be a little over 1,000 at the Europe one.
Yeah, I won't be there, Eric, but John and Lou will be there if you need anything from AMD.
Okay, cool. Okay, I knew Lou was going. I didn't know John was. That's good to know.
Yeah, I think the collector update.
Okay, good. He's doing that. Yeah, I guess I saw that yesterday in the meeting. Okay. So I guess one of the big announcements is finally after what 7 months it seems like, or we've we brought in the PR that Alex had started on updating the SFR format. So it's now CBOR based rather than JSON. And this should align better with kind of the CORIM and runtime attestation. Still, the older JSON format will accept that for quite a while. I mean, a lot of reviews are already in flight. It's going to take people some time to update their tooling, but
So in
when
the
yes,
interim, are we expected to provide both formats? It's not a big deal. The tools do that for us, but I'm just curious what the expectation is.
I guess whenever it's convenient to the SRP, switch to the newer one, but I don't think we need to do both.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And it still is, there's still a convenience if we can have the human readable JSON printed there. Just, when I kind of want to go look at something, I can quickly look at the GitHub and see the ASCII JSON rather than trying to translate the JWT or now the CBOR file.
Yeah, that the human readable CBOR text it's kind of awful.
Yeah. So, but that's just kind of a nice to have. I mean, programmatically, all we need is the signed version, but it's really convenient for humans looking at things. Okay, looks like we've got a pretty good. So I also noticed there's been a lot more uptick on people publishing short form reports. A lot of more, new vendors are publishing. We've had a lot more coming in SSDs and then some networking and CPUs. So progress is being made there. I appreciate all the vendors and SRPs for all the hard work they've been doing. And then the questions coming back to me and Nick and others on how to handle these. So, okay. I think we're pretty good. So do we have any open questions or anything? And, that's kind of what we're here for, is what questions do we have for either, the TAC or, other community members to try to answer, and how do we move forward here?
And
I had a question, actually. This is Ahmad from ARM. I wanted to ask if you have like a charter document for OCP. I was trying to look in GitHub, and I was wondering if there's a way you can just share. This is my first time attending this, and I'm wondering if you can share like a link or something.
Yeah, so I don't know if we have an official charter document. Kind of what we have is, this was a sub project from the security work stream, and then it's kind of all there on GitHub, kind of the framework there.
Okay. Okay, I'll keep looking.
Okay, yeah. And let me know if you have questions, send me an email.
Sure. Thank you.
Hello, it's my first time here too. I would ask, noticed the Microsoft requirements for assigning the option ROMs and now include an SCP safe
UEFI as well.
Yep. So, yeah, and UEFI, yeah. So I was wondering how streamlined that is. That seems like there might be a fair amount of incoming for that, and
I was going to bring that up also. We've seen
you.
a big influx of requests regarding that. From a Microsoft procurement perspective, having OCP safe as a requirement seems fine, because eventually that just gets built into the equipment cost that Microsoft's paying for anyways. In this case, it's a requirement of the signing program, which might not necessarily involve Microsoft at all. And so we're starting to see people in the open source community struggling with this as a requirement. And it's not clear that it was all well thought out.
Okay. Yeah, so this came about. I had a conversation, with my Microsoft hat on. I had a conversation with our kind of device Windows side. So I'm in Azure, so I'm mostly worried about the data center and this, the cloud portion. And they need to do better on what they sign. Every few times a year you hear something about, Microsoft signed some malware, a malicious driver, or malicious whatever. So they wanted to have something to, raise the bar on what they're signing. And they were looking at how to do audits, how to do code reviews, and they had heard about SAFE. So they came to me and I met with them a few times and described our process. And they thought, well, that sounds like a good bar for them. But yeah, in terms of what all gets covered by that, I don't know.
I guess the question fundamentally is, are you using the same CA to sign for both your Azure data center stuff and for the consumer laptops? Because it seems like you are, and that's where the is.
I don't know. I suspect
There's
it's
just
different.
one UFI CA as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. So you're pushing this now as a requirement for like Linux laptops that don't involve any Microsoft software whatsoever.
Exactly. Yeah, I
Okay.
was concerned a little bit just about the fact that there's going to be a pretty new high bar for people signing. I think it's a really great thing for them to be doing. But the on-ramp for that, to be able to do that transition and have the vendors begin to know what's involved and the extra time involved to get the passage, all of that seems like there's a fair amount of work to be done.
Yes, if people have been doing audits and reviews, they're familiar with the process and the code is in a reasonable shape. But if it's new to a firm, that could be difficult.
And
Yep.
that's what we're seeing, and not just like like firms that are new to this kind of review, but also like open source project where there's like zero funding.
Yeah. Okay. I will have to. Okay, I'm gonna have to figure out how we do this. Okay. When I was chatting with this, I was kind of under the impression this was for, call it like the Windows drivers and your Surface laptops and things like that. I need to understand that ecosystem more. Like
No.
that's a different group than me. I'm not as familiar with that. So
I think if you separated the CAs so that like Azure's CA was separate from all of the rest of it, then it would probably be fine. And that way you still get what you want, but not have to impact the rest of that community. But I don't know if that's super easily viable.
The way the requirement's written right now, it's for every single option ROM that
Yep.
wants to boot with secure boot on. Doesn't matter what Linux or Windows or anything.
Did this change go through like the UFI consortium that they defined all the specs, they defined how the UFI CA works. Microsoft operates the UFI CA on behalf of like the UFI group. I forget what they're officially called.
There was a post on Microsoft's Community Hub back in October. That seems to be what everybody's referencing with all the new requirements. Here, I'll just drop it in the chat so everyone can see it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it anywhere else.
It kind of caught me off guard as well when people started reaching out and asking about it, and I was like, "Well, what the hell are they talking about?" And when I went and found this, I'm like, "Okay, this is new." Wasn't really well communicated.
yes, and so somewhere in the last week or so is when I learned about this post as well. I knew that they'd want to do something with UFI. I didn't know it became a requirement and what the scope and scale was. So I will have to find out on the Microsoft side how this works.
I think it's the only thing on this list that actually has like an actual cost, which might be catching people a bit on a back foot.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Here's where, yes, good intentions, but how do you actually get it all implemented, especially with open source things? Okay. I will do some follow-up to try to understand Microsoft, the plan for the timeline there, and yeah, especially open source ones. Okay, I'll follow up and I'll probably send some people some questions. Maybe we have follow-up questions as I try to learn a little bit more about this all around.
Okay. The only other thing that I wanted to bring up, we've been hearing from a number of hardware vendors. So the way the OCP Safe program works is, we provide the long form report, and that's for their internal use, and they go off and they fix all the findings, whatever. And then the short form report is just kind of a very light summary. That's the piece that gets published. And what they're finding is that the big CSPs, I guess in particular Microsoft, is still asking for more information that's not in the short form report. And so the only thing that they've got really is the long form report, which contains a lot of details they don't necessarily want to share. And so the ask was that, well, what if there was like a medium form report or whatever the hell we want to call it? And so it contains like enough detail to satisfy the big CSPs, but not necessarily all the nitty gritty details. And I don't know if others are feeling that same burden. Like the vendors are kind of asking, well, what's the point of having these two reports if we still have to share all the details? Like, why don't we just go back to doing that?
Yeah, well, so the short form is something that can be published and shared with the entire world, especially our customers with no NDA. So that's why we really need to have that. And now in terms of like, what do we need to do to have, Azure or Google or whoever else feel confident in their, in protecting their systems and their platform, that's where we still want to have some more information. And, some of the details in the long form, how do we understand, okay, well, there's this issue, but what does that mean? how else can we mitigate it? And yeah, so I've had these pushbacks from a number of companies saying, well, we're fine sharing the report, but we don't want to share our source code. So some long form reports, you look at it like a couple paragraph description, a screenshot with 30 lines of code, highlighting it, and then some more description. So I've told them, sure, just redact out the source code. I don't need to see that at all. But I would like to have the, couple paragraph description of what the issue is and how it could be exploited.
Okay, so I guess, does it make sense to put more description in the summary of in the SFR, or would it make sense to do more of like a redacted long form report?
I think probably maybe a little bit of a redacted long form. The short form, I mean, more information is better, but if there's an issue, you still have to kind of be careful with the line of giving more information to an attacker. So the fact that there's something there tells me, okay, I need to go talk to the vendor or my server provider or something to understand how is this mitigated.
The general idea of the short form is like proof that the work was done, not an enumeration. Like trying to put more, like honestly, the short form report has possibly too much information in it already. I don't think adding more there is going to be useful.
Yeah.
Okay, so fundamentally, what you're looking for is more detailed description of the findings, but that part doesn't have to be public. So
correct. Yep.
We can look at suggesting some kind of redacted version of the report going forward.
Yep.
Is there a binding between the long and short form reports?
No, the long form report is like literally just like a PDF.
Okay. So I mean, like the question is really like if there's not some kind of like cryptographic association between the two, can like the vendors just redact the long form report to like whatever level they're happy with and hand it to the customer, and then the customer can argue about whether they redacted too much?
They can, but PDFs being a pain in the ass, they'll probably
sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're not that hard to redact. You just cut out the sections that you don't want in there instead of highlighting over them. But
I'll just paste a black box over top of it like everybody does.
Yeah, like it's not hard to redact properly. It's just that most people, that's a different.
Yeah. I mean, I think most of us are using a similar style of tools to generate these things, so we could probably do it without too much trouble.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure it was a process problem and not a technical problem.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's really just a process problem of like when people, like the long form report, obviously, like for the purposes of the vendor being able to fix things is going to include, whatever code snippets or internal documentation that the auditor had access to like point out like here's where your problem is.
I think what I was looking for is just some level of detail as to what the CSPs are actually looking for. If like an executive summary is enough, because like that's not included in the short form report, right? But if it sounds like that's not going to be enough, they're looking for more of details of each finding, which we can do.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So, Rob or any of the SRPs, as you get these, if it's a Microsoft vendor, let me know and we can try to figure out how to sort this out, what we need. And then, I know Nick has opinions about what he's going to see in his detailed report too. I suspect we're probably generally going to be aligned there, but let's work through this, figure out what we actually need to see. And it could be some is redacted, and then that could be a Microsoft with our vendor problem of like, no, we need more information. We need to for a random issue here or there.
Yeah, I don't think we want to wade into your vendor relationships, but it would be helpful if we're producing something that we know that you're going to accept.
Yep. Yeah, I think we want the description, remove the source code, just, that would be fine. That might even be preferable. Some fear of IP contamination, though the security people tend to not work on our implementations at all, so it should be safe, but yeah. Okay. So, Matt, trying to remember, there was a topic from the Clipper trademark conversations we've been having that we thought we should bring up here. Do we think, are we ready to bring that up here, do you think? Or do you still
I
want to?
don't even remember that topic. Which
I know that's what
there
I'm
were
trying
so
to remember
many. I
now
didn't know
too.
which one you're referring to.
It was a few weeks ago. I thought, oh, we should bring this up at the next monthly, and then I have forgotten on what the topic was. Maybe part of us, like we've got a dozen PRs that are waiting to be merged right now, both in the mainline Calyptra repo and then also in the RTL repo. I think it's only those two that add some more clarification on what's needed and what's not and what the process is to get the Calyptra trademark.
So there's a number of trademark reviews in flight right now. If you're going to make changes to those requirements, I think maybe versioning it would make sense. Like if we're going to miss some things that were like added after the review was done, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep, correct. Yeah, we needed to have a versioning scheme. I don't think any of the stuff for changes right now are going to probably cause a problem. But if it is, bring it up and we'll have to have a conversation. I don't want to make up rules after the fact. That's not fair. So
there's a bunch of them that are like clarifications, right? Like I've made 2 or 3 word edits on a number of things just to make it, painfully clear what the intent was. I don't think that should really cause a problem for anything in flight. Yeah, I'm trying to think if we've made any of the requirements. I think in most cases we've relaxed things instead of making them more strict.
yes.
Or just made it more clear, like that the focus is somewhat narrower than like a potentially worst case interpretation.
Yes. Yep. We've added clarification, and in some cases that reduced what people could have believed was the level of rigor necessary.
I would have to go back and look over the dashboard to like skim through all of the changes and see if any of them are likely to cause conflicts for ongoing reviews. But if anybody, Eric, do you have the dashboard link handy?
I don't. I usually just go to the issues and then just look for they're all tagged with trademark.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. Okay. I do have that tab open still. I will put it in the chat. So if anybody is performing an audit and sees like wants to go skim the PRs that are open and see something that's going to like create problems for an ongoing audit, let us know. I think a lot of the PRs have been driven by feedback from the audits in progress or audits potentially in progress, getting started. So I don't think there's a lot of things in here that are massive changes.
Yes. And all of the Calyptra Tech members are going through the process right now too. So
the subsystem, Eric, we should make sure that the changes for the subsystem one that adds subsystem that gets versioned.
yes.
That's the big one that I know of that is like a substantive change to like how it's being structured. The other ones are mostly either cosmetic or clarification.
Thought there was some effort to split the two into separate documents, or is it just separate sections?
The subsystem versus core?
Versus correct.
Yeah, one of the PRs in the link was about that, and it's essentially taking the requirements list and splitting it into sections for like this applies to both, this applies to core, this applies to subsystem. And then there are just like there's the RTL requirements table in the RTL repo, there's a similar table in the subsystem repo that the subsystem section will point at.
So yeah, if you have a look at that, see if there's anything that could be a problem for your product going through, or it would be hard for an SRP to evaluate, or, happy to have your comments. We've been working on this, weekly for a few months now. I think we're kind of hoping to be done with this soon. And, Jameson from Tetral's done a lot of work on this one, so we appreciate that help. Okay. Are there other topics or questions?
I have one
Speaking,
if nobody else has anything.
I had a quick question about the safe review and for Calyptra subsystem and when that report will be published on the GitHub.
Rob, do you have an ETA?
Yeah, they're finishing up. So the problem is it's a bit of a moving of the goalposts, right? So there's a 2.0 and the 2.1. So they're finishing up the 2.1 right now. I was going to ask you, Eric, offline, did you want separate reports for the 2.0 and the 2.1 tags?
Probably should, since some people will be taking just 2.0.
Okay. Yeah. It will be soon, before the end of the month.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I assume any issues that you've been finding, you've been communicating with the team anyways to fix them as we go. So
yeah.
Yep. Okay. So there shouldn't be any surprises at the end of the month. Okay. Okay. Matt, I think you might be up.
So I somebody forwarded a link to the solid requirements to me yesterday, and I wanted to open that up for discussion.
Okay. Yes. So Nick and I looked at kind of our more general platform security requirements from both Microsoft and Google. And so we just, work together for like, okay, what is, call it, let's say the 80% where we have alignment on what we both want from a platform and what we want today and where we see ourselves going. And let's just publish that, just as a requirements list. So people know if they want to build for Google or Microsoft, this is where we want to go. This is what we need to do. Here's a good baseline. It's going to get you, at least 80% of the way there. Google or Microsoft still may have, unique specific requirements, specific implementations or something, but this is going to get you a lot of the way there. So these are, they're written fairly high level requirements right now. And the way it's kind of written is kind of here's a list of functional requirements, and then per device type, like a CPU might say, and these functional requirements apply and index into a subset. And for an SSD, these other set of functional requirements may apply. So not all the requirements apply to all of the devices, but you have a way to figure out for an SSD, what requirements do I need? For a CPU, what do I need? For a BMC, what do I need?
So I guess I have some feedback on the wording of the requirements themselves, which I can take offline. But I guess the higher level question is sort of at the top, like it characterizes this as sort of not definitive, like exhaustive list of requirements, but like general guidance. And I was kind of wondering how does the audit process for this look? How do you maintain consistency? How do you deal with lawyers from a vendor who's upset that they failed the audit?
Yep. Okay, so yeah, this is a non-exhaustive list. This is kind of where we agree and saw overlap. It's kind of our starting point here. And sometimes I would say, oh, that's a good idea that Microsoft didn't require and Google did, and vice versa. So our current thought is these solid requirements, we'd like to start seeing them showing up in the long form reports. So the NDA protected version, maybe this fall. So newer audits coming in, start looking at this, but that, gaps won't be published. but that's both to kind of inform Microsoft and Google, or the consumers of these, as to, hey, where something might be missing, or you got to mitigate somewhere else in your platform. And then also lets the vendor know, oh, I need to do better for this for the next generation of my product. Now, when these show up in the published short form report, we don't really have a date for that yet. If it's a firmware issue, that could come sooner. If it's going to be a hardware impactful issue, obviously we have to wait until the next generation.
I have questions about how you'd even embed this in the short form report as it exists today. That's maybe a different conversation. I guess one of the feedbacks I'd provided very early on to SAFE was you have to tell the vendors what you want and how you're going to grade it so that they can make sure they meet the requirements before they even go to do the audit. And this feels like the opposite of that. And as a practical matter, I don't know how you're going to get vendor buy-in to do this.
Because this is, well, the starting point for this was the requirements documents that we give to all of our suppliers. It started with RevB.
Baseline security, like most people should be doing this stuff anyways, like, code signing and secure updates.
Sure.
There was nothing shocking in here.
I'm not saying there is. I'm saying I need to be able to test and make sure I pass before I bring it to you to do an audit, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do that with this list? Like it is very vague to the point that I don't know how to go tell my management before they sign a purchase order to do an audit that yeah, we're pretty sure we're going to pass this.
So the way I looked at this is more like product requirements. Like ideally this should be rolled in way earlier in the process. But when we're doing like an OCP safe audit, for example, a lot of this stuff is stuff that we're already looking at. And if we find something, that's a finding that would show up in the short form report regardless. And now we just have a requirement to point it to, so we can say, you screwed this up, but also there's a requirement behind this that is now lacking. So I feel like the reporting aspect of this is going to be straightforward because we're already kind of doing it. But yeah, as this evolves and more things get added to this list, then I can see some contention. But as it stands, it all just seems like very baseline stuff, especially if like Microsoft is already putting this in their requirements to their vendors up front.
Yeah, I think this is similar to the RevB document. You're familiar with Microsoft, RevB is what we've been using for the last few years. RevB of our security requirements since 21, I think. RevC is just now coming out. So this is just an 80% subset of that.
Yes, but you have different concerns with what happens when you fail and who's judging it.
Yeah. Yes, because right now there's gaps and we can mitigate it somewhere else or accept the risk.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Eric, if you give me requirements and I tell you which ones I do and don't meet, and we negotiate whether that's okay or not.
Yep.
Right. There's no other interesting problems that come into play potentially, right? If Rob does an audit and fails my product, what happens when my legal department gets annoyed because we lost a sale because Rob failed our audit?
Yeah. Well, there's no fail, but when there's an issue that's found.
Sure. Yeah. If you don't buy my product because of Rob's report,
then there's a problem.
It doesn't matter whether we call it pass or fail or nuance. It's the same end result, and it's going to result in the same lawyers getting involved.
Yep.
This, by the way, is another example, and it's kind of like the third example of OCP safe being bolted on as a requirement for something without fully communicating with everybody to make sure everyone's got buy-in. The two big
the
Calyptra trademark one and the UFI signing.
Yeah, the Eufy one was a surprise. This one here, I don't think we had planned to make this public until later,
Okay.
but it kind of got out. So
Sure, but like have any of the hardware vendors been involved with this list, Eric? Like that's my concern is that like this has the potential to like I don't know if you've ever dealt with lawyers from hardware vendors. I have. They're very finicky about certain things, and this seems like the kind of thing that will upset them. That's why I'm like I'm more concerned for the SRPs who are going to be caught in the crossfire when
okay,
like they issue a report and somebody doesn't get a sale because of that report. So like generally speaking, audit programs like this get buy-in from all the vendors participating for precisely this kind of reason.
If there's a specific list of requirements, you mentioned that Rev B list that you're already sharing with them. If their legal team has already blessed that and committed to doing that, and this is just a subset, then there's probably no issue. But maybe it would be helpful to link them, like just put a pointer to those other requirements in here, so that it's clear that they've already committed to this in a different view.
Rob, the difference is you evaluating Eric's requirements versus Eric.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
Right? If Eric says I don't like that, my lawyers can't go sue Eric for not buying a product because he doesn't like what we built. They might sue you for saying, I don't think Eric will like what you built.
Yeah.
And signing a report to that effect.
yeah. Though I guess here what I'm looking for is Rob to highlight. Just like right now, I talk to you and to find out, yep, there are these three things that you can't meet or it isn't quite perfect, and we negotiate. Here it's Rob saying, here are these three things. Talk to your customer.
Yeah, like we would point at like some finding and say, well, this we don't believe this meets this particular requirement that maybe you committed to with Microsoft, but like that's between you and them. I could see vendors pushing back on us, saying, "Hey, could you like maybe downplay that one a little?" Which would be kind of annoying, but we'll have that discussion when it happens. But yeah, I could see the contention that Matt's getting at.
I was going to say the problem is the vaguer the requirements are, the more of that you will get. And
Yeah.
the other problem is the vaguer the requirements are, the more you will get a race to the bottom between SRPs
Yeah.
who are
Yeah,
willing to say it meets the requirements in order to get more business.
With OCP Safe, it's not really a gate. It's just the fact that they've done a review is the only pass, right? What's in the review is not relevant. And now we're talking about making the stuff that's in there relevant to whatever purchase deal is going on behind the scenes.
Yep. That's the concern. And leaving the requirements vague when you make that transition, it seems like it's going to cause substantially more problems.
Okay. Yeah, that's good feedback. Yeah, I'll work with Nick, see if we can find, or if there's a couple of issues in particular that of the requirements that you think this needs to be rephrased or clarified.
There are, but those are sort of separate to like the same kind of pendantry I've been doing to the Calyptra trademark list, and I can provide like, do you want feedback and issues, or do you want me to send it to like you and Nick first, or but like that can be handled offline. That's
that's all.
About, like, is this requirement phrased correctly? And there are a couple of them that very much aren't, but I'll let you know about that.
Matt, you could just add some feedback directly in the repository. That's what I did back in February.
Okay. I will make some comments. There are a couple that are problematic the way they're written, but they're fixed.
I mean, Dick took a shot. Rob did a little cleanup. So I mean, happy to take the input. I think it'll make it better.
The debug one just hits a personal pet peeve of mine, and it's number one on the list. So there's that. But I can provide that feedback. I don't think that's the real like at a high level. That's not the thing I'm concerned about. We can iron out the requirements. They're not officially part of the process yet. Like getting them cleaned up before it like actually intercepts real reviews is I don't think going to be a problem. I'm more concerned at the high level about transitioning from like the process being literally just prove you've done an audit and you can negotiate the results of the findings with your customer to like adding requirements for like this feels like a step that like a partial step, but because of the way it's sort of structured, it doesn't really line up with how other audit programs work, and it has some issues that those don't as a result.
Okay.
It's more the top level, like how do you handle the inevitable backlash when vendors don't like the result of the audit?
Yeah. Yep. Which there's going to be a lot of in the next year as people go through their CRA requirements. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Matt, let's work to clean this up. Coming out from the vendor perspective, I'd appreciate your view on there. Okay. Other topics or questions?
Just a quick one. I'm trying to open the link for Calyptra requirements, and it's
Yeah, I
giving me
think
the
it's I think it's
404.
a view that Matt has created is not shared. I couldn't open it either, but you can look at the issues in the issue tracker though.
Yeah, I think you need to be a Calyptra consortium member to see that
Okay,
view.
that's
But
what
if
I
you look
was
at the
wondering.
issues, you might have to look at
Oh, is that
the
really? I didn't
Yeah.
realize that wasn't a public dashboard. Okay. Yeah, if you go to the Calyptra repo and search for the trademark label, you'll
Okay.
find them.
Okay,
And
the Calyptra repo
repo
is
and the
open,
RTO
right?
repo.
It's a public repo.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any more topics or questions, like maybe we can end a little bit early. Any
I'd
last-
like to just say a quick hello, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
Eric.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jeb Carter. First time attending these meetings. Long time OCP Safe advocate. Nice to see so many familiar faces. That's it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for joining.
Yeah. I'm thrilled. This is awesome.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll end a little bit early. And Matt, I look forward to your comments, and we'll work fixing those issues. And I'll see a few of you in 3 weeks, I suppose, in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye.